Your mum was always the dreamer. She used to talk about setting up her own photography studio.
This jump.
It's one way to get off this shitty little island, I guess.
Get through your exams and just see where it takes you.
Not sure it's going to make much of a difference. Not sure anything will. Take the life you're given, right?
No, you get the life you make for yourself.
Shall we? We shall. God, please don't make this any harder than it needs to be.
Harder? You are only 18. You know nothing about the real world. This is not happening. You hear me?
Always been afraid of commitment. No, not at all. I mean, maybe a little bit. Just because you get close to someone does not mean they're going to pop their clock.
I'm thinking of something completely new.
Like what? Love?
Murder.
Tea. And epiphany. The more love we have, better off we all are. You know.
Takes courage to love, Mum, doesn't it?
It does, baby doll. It does.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Caterina Campagna, and I'm here with some very special guests, the directing team behind Love, Tea, and Epiphany. They are a welcome addition to this year's 5th annual Her Vision Film Festival. I'm here speaking with Davini Malcolm and Probir Dutt, once again, the team behind Love, Tea, and Epiphany, joining us all the way from Australia. Now, this is such an important film, and it follows 3 main characters in the form of vignettes. So I'd just like to start the interview off by asking, what was the impetus for this film?
The origins of the movie was really around when I had my daughter. And I thought to myself, as a man, even though you have relationships, you don't really understand what's in the mind of a girl. And I just desperately wanted to be able to relate to my daughter in terms of what goes through your mind, what are the challenges that you're going to face that I didn't face as a man, and what are there any limitations of empowerment that you have just because you're a girl that I don't have because I'm a boy. So I really wanted to explore those and to try and remove them as much as possible. So, being a filmmaker, we're all very conscious, and Australia is no different than the rest of the world, where it's a very male-heavy industry, and we were very conscious of trying to right that balance. And if women want to become directors of photography or directors or head of art departments or whatever it happens to be, they should have as much equity and opportunities as anybody else. And that was so it was a 2-pronged approach. It was to try and create a project that employs as much equity as possible. So we ended up actually having a very female-heavy cast and crew. And also it was to try and tell a story about one's female empowerment and one's own power as a woman to be able to say, right, I can achieve that. Life throws all this stuff at me. I have all these negative experience in life. I have positive experience in life. But at the end of the day, my power is my power, and I can use that how I wish. And strangely now, my daughter is now 14, and she's studying filmmaking at school. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or bad thing, but there we go. So it did actually achieve its mission.
And I'd probably speak to that as well, and speak to the fact that as women, there is a particular way we conduct ourselves. As you're a woman, Katerina, it's like, I think part of my driver was what the capacities as women and as friends that we can have, and as women in community, which these characters represent, where we can solve a lot of problems of the world over copious pots of tea. We don't drop bombs. We damn well don't drop bombs. And I feel like it's a really important time for sweet movies like this and stories like this, where we show how we solve stuff. And we're not doing it in that patriarchal, old masculine way. That is dying. And we are saying we can chew the fat. We can talk things through. Yep, it can be messy sometimes. And we can work things through, and told through the lens of exquisite pots of tea. And also leaning into the lineage around drinking tea together. That men do it too, but I'm going to speak to the feminine in this case. That the whole ritual and notion of that comforting cup of tea. And for some, it'll be coffee, or it might be a vodka, but in our film, it's tea, generally. So just that comfort and that quality, and that with our daughters, I've got daughters, and we've been drinking tea together since they were little girls. So that's at the heart of it too. And the way it got started is Probir had written a first draft, and he wanted to cast 3 leading actresses. And I was actually, because I'm also an actress of 40 years, and I was one of the women that auditioned for him and got one of the 3 leading parts like 10 years ago when we started on this crazy ride. And in the end, I was so passionately involved that we decided, Probir and I, that we would collaborate and develop this script, which we did. Yeah. So that's really how we started together, in answer to your question.
So what I think you did brilliantly was balancing speaking to the feminine and also problem solving. But what also interests me and was beautifully done and balanced, threaded throughout the film, were these lush dream sequences. Do you want to speak more about that and how that came to be?
So there's a famous a filmmaker from Australia called Paul Cox, who won Venice, I think, a few times, but he's a highly regarded filmmaker. Sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and he used this trick where he would, in those days they were shooting on 35 mm, and he used this trick when he wanted to go into the character's mind. He would switch to 16 mm. So as a viewer, something's not quite right. It's not actually set in the reality of the film. And he basically taught me this concept of dream sequences. And in fact, the film that Davini and I are working on at the moment, Poems and Meditations, he was one of the people that cast his eye over that script. And again, we have some of those tricks of the dream sequences. So we just use it as a tool to try and get into the head of the character and communicate what's inside somebody's head to the viewer, rather than trying to do it all in that kind of reality of the story. So I love the technique. In my last film, The 3 A's of Sasha, we used it as well. So I think it's just going to be, I'm going to take it from Paul Cox and run with it. I think it's a beautiful technique.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So you met him and were able to have discussions about this technique, and he gave you that insight.
Yeah, I've met him a number of times, actually, both in Australia and in India. So he was highly involved in the Calcutta Film Festival. So he was one of us, probably one of Australia's, I would say, probably the greatest filmmaker that came out of Australia. Certainly in terms of art house film. He's got some. If you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend that you look him up on IMDb and go through his list and just check them out. So in terms of Australian art house, he is absolutely the master.
Beautiful. And I'm curious, and I'm sure our viewers would like to know, what's it like filming in Australia, I mean, we're all kind of products of our environment to some extent. So I'm wondering, what is it like shooting in Australia? How does the environment bleed into things?
Well, filming in Australia, when we made this film, it was bloody hot. It was middle of summer. Like, some days were 40 something degrees Celsius, which so that was intense. That was hard at times. I think Australian crews, like American crews, I've worked with both, and British crews as an actor, super professional, fantastic people. We've got a laconic, laid-back style, as most of you know over there. We're pretty chilled, but highly professional, showing up. We made a deliberate choice with this film because we chose to make an independent film and not go for funding. Probir and his wife Jojo and myself and my husband Scotty self-funded the film. Wow. Because we made a choice probably 5 or 6 years ago that we wanted to do that, and we spoke with our other producers about it because we wanted to really maintain complete autonomy with every aspect of the film, the casting, the this and the that and the other. So we made that decision. So when we were choosing our crew members, we very passionately chose to also give opportunities to absolutely talented, say, our art director, Jonah Comby, to our young producer, Mariah Manet, who's also an actress on the film, Nick Sumner Wright, our first AD production manager, for example, and to give them the opportunity. They were right on the edge where they'd made small independent things themselves, self-motivated, self-driven, and it's like, here's your opportunity. Do you want to step into this role and work with us? Because both Probir and I, both as filmmakers and as parents and as community people that care, we really have a passion about supporting the next generation of filmmakers and crew members. So that was a very deliberate choice to bring these people on board and say, yeah, we could have chosen someone with even more experience who's already got plenty of runs on the board. But each of those people, for example, that I just mentioned, Mariah, Nick and Jonah, have gone on to do international projects since Love Tea and Epiphany. And Mariah's based in London. Nick's moving to London. Jonah's about to travel again and doing extraordinary work. They've all worked on American productions. I even gave my daughter Gabriella, an opportunity in wardrobe. She'd already worked on La Brea, your American TV series, in the costume department. Wow. That series about the sinkhole, whatever it is. So she worked in wardrobe on that. And I remember on her first day, I said, what did you do? She said, I cleaned mud off boots for 11 hours. And I said, wow. Welcome to the industry, honey. So she went through a number of projects. And then I said to her, do you want to come on board? You won't get costume designer, but you can assist if you want to come on this film. And she did a great job on it as well and has gone on to work on other American projects and Australian films. So we really have had a passion about that with the young ones, bringing them on board too. I guess I can speak to that. Do you want to add anything, Pro, to that one?
We certainly had a couple of oldies on set as well. I mean, 40 degrees in Australia is 104 degrees in America, so it's hot. When we were shooting the gallery scene, the saxophone player in the gallery scene is actually quite a famous saxophone player here in Australia called Wilbur Wilde. And I think we nearly killed him because we were, on set. He was wearing a jacket. We were in a warehouse. It was 104 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so much hotter inside. And he was going redder and redder and redder. We ended up having to get some emergency industrial air conditioning units to try and cool the place down. But of course, you can't run those when you're rolling the camera. So I think we had to eventually put him in the makeup room, which was the only room that had air conditioning, and cool him down for a bit before he passed out. Otherwise, we would have made Australian film history by killing one of our very own musical icons. And luckily that didn't happen.
Definitely. We also made a choice, Katerina. We have a fantastic DP called Martine Wolf, who's done plenty of stuff for Disney and worked in London. She's part of Illuminix Rising, the DP team in London, worked here on some great films as well. And we were very lucky to get Martine because she has a beautiful eye for camera as well. And she brought with her 2 female first assistant camera and second AC in Indigo Tate Aitken and Melissa Nicholson, who are both trained filmmakers as well, but they were just out of film college, the younger 2. So having them on board was fantastic too. And it made it, from my perspective as a director and as an actress, because I'm in the film as well, I felt really safe, and I know that my other actresses felt really safe having a female crew camera department for those very intimate scenes. And we were very deliberate with those scenes to have our wonderful males on the crew set up, and then to put privacy screens up and have our actresses be able to do those scenes with their actors and feel really safe. So that felt really important as well. I have to say that our crew members, lighting department, and a team of guys, brilliant and super sensitive around the feminine as well. So for us, it was about equity. It's not so much it's a female-led, female-driven film and we can only have women. We both love men and women. We both, and people of all kinds of orientations. Like, we really celebrate humanity, Probir and I. So likewise, I've got such a lot of respect and gratitude to all the guys on our team who were stunning men that had the deepest respect for the feminine on set, like just extraordinary. We've got Jordan Fraser Trumbull, one of our producers, who's got a movie coming out, The Cost. He's also acting in our film. He was in Legend of Ben Hall. The Cost is coming out in America, I think, soon, and it's a cross between some horrific, scary Wolf Creek and Deliverance or something. So Jordan's capacity to be sensitive to the feminine was absolutely exquisite, as were our other guys. Don't you agree, Probir?
No, absolutely, and I think it was a very important also to have intimacy coordinators on those scenes, whether you like it or not. I think it's just something that you need to do. When I made my first feature film, it wasn't a thing. But now it is, and I think it's something that we very much need to embrace, whether the actors want it or not. It just gives you that level of safety and comfort, and it can actually, be very, very useful in terms of your blocking, just from a practical perspective as well.
And I would say young actors want it now. Like the Luca Sardellis, who's one of our female beautiful young leads. You might remember Luca when you looked at the film, Katerina, long dark hair. She's beautiful.
Yes.
Had never done an intimacy scene like that before. So it was really important for her to be held. I think most actors want it. I mean, I'm in my early 60s now. I came from the school of being in the trenches in the 80s as a young, pretty actress, and it was not easy. It was not easy. And when our intimacy coordinator, Kima De Silva, said to me, you've got a scene in the bathtub, I feel like I want to coach you a bit. I initially had the old imprint of, I don't really need that. I'm producing, I'm going to be directing, there's so much going on. And yet when I shot the scene, she had the capacity to see what I needed even after I shot this scene, which was a harrowing scene. And she said to me afterwards, let's just go into one of the production offices and just take some space. And I didn't realize it, that I went into that room and I just cried for about an hour afterwards. And I didn't realise, because I'm of the old school that never got that support, I didn't know how much I needed the support till I got it. And I went, wow, there will always be that, even for us oldies, in every other film we make, even if it's not an obvious intimacy scene, because I wasn't like in a scene with anyone else. I was alone doing a monologue. But again, it's just having that holding when a crew is witnessing someone in an intimacy scene, because I was naked, that's also requires an intimacy coordinator. So it was really interesting to really lean into the strong benefits of that. I mean, I'd also speak to another area of crew. We were really particular about holding at the highest order we could within the context of a self-funded film. And our catering department Jo, who's one of our producers, Probir's wife, is also a naturopath, and she's an amazing cook. And she headed up the catering department, and we made sure that on set, I don't know if you know this yourself, if you've been on sets, Katerina, where the sweets bowl comes out at 3:00 because everyone's tired and snakes and whatever else. She baked, and her team baked things like high order protein cookies at a natural standard. So everyone was fed at that level for every meal, all of our crew and our cast. And for Probir and for Jojo, it was really important that we brought a particular standard and ethic around how we hold our people. And with the deep respect that we wanted to give everyone, we even had things like rescue remedy, homeopathics for stress. And they were available to our crew. And whenever Jo saw that somebody needed it, she would go and attend to that person at that holistic level.
Wow, that's amazing. I think you've just made a lot of people want to come and shoot in Australia. But I mean, just the attention to detail. Kudos to you for having a vulnerability coach. But everywhere, this attention to detail that you're describing is so evident on screen. It plays out in the film as well. And I'm just curious, you said it's 10 years in the making. Was it 8 years in the writing process and then 2 years for shooting and editing?
May I jump in and Probir quickly? Bossy me. May I drop in? I'm going to jump in first. We got to about 8.5 years. And as you might remember, Katerina, we all as a global community went through COVID and the lockdowns and things. Melbourne had one of the toughest lockdowns in the world. I was seeing Elizabeth Gilbert talk the other day, your beautiful Elizabeth Gilbert from New York, the writer, 2 nights ago, and she acknowledged Melbourne people. I think we had the longest lockdown of anywhere in the world. So that really put the brakes on us getting this film made, because we couldn't do anything for 2 years in effect. It got to 8.5 years. Pro and I got to this point where we were reading the script to each other. And I looked at him and I said, I've been drinking a lot of coffee for a long time. I've been off Earl Grey tea for years. I really want to drink tea now. And he looked at me and said, I think we've got the draft. It works. And we started the whole, I said to him, I'm getting on with it now. He was busy on Adelaide Fringe Festival writing a score for that. And I said, I'm going to start with the casting with Mariah. We brought Mariah in, Manet, who I spoke of earlier, to do the initial casting, and then we would bring the shortlist to Probir. But Mariah and I were very passionate about that female gaze for the casting, and we can be very bossy, poor Probir, sometimes. And so we started, and I thought, if I don't get on with this now, I don't know if it's going to happen. I felt just got to that point of being driven in some insane way that I have to do it now. I felt like spirit-led, do it. And so we got to, from 8.5 years casting, we brought in our producers and got them on board. So started doing meetings with them. We got our main cast at the beginning of the 9th year. We then, with Probir, we worked on the other cast members. I started looking for the locations. I've got a background in the 80s before I had kids of being an advertising and fashion stylist as well as an actress. So I've got a very visual eye. So I just went looking for all the locations, and I had a real sense after talking with Probir about what we were wanting. So, madly climbing up cliff faces in the rain, shooting locations and borrowing and stealing opportunities with people. And we just found when people read our script, they said, like, beautiful restaurants like Rupert on Rupert in Melbourne and a beautiful location at a high-end place in the hills. They said, we want you to have our location. We love your story. We relate to your story. We drink tea, or I drink tea with my grandparents. I want you to make it here. So we just got this wave of generosity coming towards us in that 9th year. And then near the end of the 9th year, we were going to shoot at the beginning of the 10th year, and we had everything in place. And then in the end of October, my mother died, like 12 weeks before the shoot. Peg, at age 94, had a really quite cool death, and she died at my house, and we all held her. We're really into doing things in a holistic way. But then it took me to a place of, how the hell am I going to shoot this? How the hell am I going to act in 38 scenes as well as co-direct when my mother's just died? So, but I think what happened for me in reflection later is it just kind of ripped me back to my bones. And given that we'd worked on the film for so long, the actress in me needed, I think, to be just torn asunder a bit. Mm-hmm. So Probir said to me, let's shoot all your scenes first, and then you can step in as a director. And so I said to our whole team, do not ask me any producer questions for the first 10 days, because I got about 32 scenes to shoot. I had about 5 later, and they were easier ones that I did later, and that was fine to slip in and out. But so Probir really guided me at the beginning as my director. I don't know if you want to speak further to that, Pro, but that's kind of how it got us to the beginning of the 10th year.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the bathtub scene for me is the best scene in the film, in terms of emotion and in terms of artistic delivery. And it was probably the hardest scene to shoot, but I think hopefully in years to come, people will look at that scene and say, "Yeah, that is a good monologue, and that is delivered really, really well." And you can know, I cry sometimes even watching it now, and I've seen it a million times, but it's still an emotive scene. So, but filmmaking is not easy, and it takes many years to get something, especially an art house film. If you rush it, you're not going to get the best out of it. It absolutely has to be bang on, and script development is quite often something that people skip over. So you should be taking a good couple of years on script development. Make sure you get other people's opinions. Make sure you get your dialogue right. A lot of people will make script format errors, which will irritate the bejesus out of DOPs and directors and actors. So you need to get all of that right before you start getting to the point whereby you want to cast, start getting the money together, and then start shooting. So the shooting bit is a very, very small component of the actual entire project. Out of a 10-year project, the shooting is 4 or 5 weeks, and that's it. So most of the project is involved in script development, and then the production side, getting everybody together, getting people in the right place at the right time is never easy. And then the post-production, also very painful. Luckily I didn't pull my hair out when we were going through post-production, but I could have easily done, because there's a lot of decisions that you have to make that can really make a difference. The first cut of our film, I think, was over 3 hours long.
3.5 hours. 3.5.
And say, right, what are we going? Obviously, that's not going to rock. What are we going to cut? So it's a very hard decision. So we got it down to 2 hours, 18 minutes, and I think that for an art house film, I think that's pretty good.
Wow. What has been audience reaction so far? What kind of feedback have you gotten? Like, for instance, not to give too much away, but I thought the tampon scene in the bathroom stall, that I think that was brilliant, a great way to connect everything. But what kind of feedback, what kind of audience reactions have you gotten so far?
Oh, it's been very positive, and to the extent whereby it's possibly led to the funding of the next feature film that Davini and I are working on. So I think people liked it so much that they're now prepared to give us money to make the next one.
Brilliant. Yay.
Yeah, and the next one is also a female-driven story. Actually, it's called Poems and Meditations, and it's really about identity, multicultural identity in an ostensibly white country, but it features a lot of the poems of Dutt, who's a famous Indian poetess from the Victorian era. And when she first published works in the Times of London, a journalist said, this could neither be written by an Indian nor a woman because they're far too good. That's right. Featuring her work quite extensively. She's a brilliant poet, quite famous in India, but not very well known in the rest of the world.
Okay, and what's always been fascinating to me is that editing room atmosphere. Like you said, it was going to be almost 3.5 hours in its original version. What are the decisions like, the talks like in the editing suite? It must feel like you're cutting off a limb, like, oh no, I can't believe we're, letting that go. If you could speak to that a little bit. And do you think, further down the line, there'll be a director's cut with the entire 3.5 version?
I think that it certainly it forces you to be disciplined, I think. So one of the main things that we cut with the dream sequences, there were a lot more dream sequences that we had, and some of them were really beautiful from an art direction perspective, and they took a long time to shoot, and we ended up cutting them. So we did think, okay, what are we going to do with these dream sequences? Because from a photography perspective, they were just, remarkably beautiful. So sadly, a lot of those went, and then obviously just trying to get the pace to keep everybody interested and invested from one frame to the next. So I think that if we had to go below 2 hours 18, I think that would be a problem, because to try and work out what else do we cut now. But certainly from 3.5 hours down to 2 hours 18, it was primarily the dream sequences that got cut, and then there was bits of dialogue that we tried to. We probably had already kind of covered it in some other areas, so we were just a little bit harsh with ourselves about making sure that the momentum kept on going. So, and I'm quite happy with the final cut. I don't think we would make a director's cut for 3.5 hours, but one of the conversations we did have is, do we actually split this up into 3 films now? Because we have part 1 with Layla going through her journey. That could easily we could have easily made that into a feature film. Part 2 with Louisa, that's an interesting story, in terms of now you're in your working life, what are the trials and tribulations of getting through your working day, and the final bit with Lulu, and with Lulu even more interestingly, because is there another story after that? After we finish the film, what happens to Lulu after that? Is there another story that involves Lulu? Where does she go? What does she do? What happens with the book? What happens with the photography in that exhibition that she released?
Right.
We made the decision to just keep it as one film and have it sectioned out. That was our ultimate choice in the end. For me, in the director's suite, when we had the assembly cut at 3.5 hours, for me, it was surprisingly obvious what we could cut, even though it came at a cost from an arthouse artistic perspective, particularly with the gorgeous dream sequences that were so aesthetically beautiful. It became apparent that it was all about, like, we are in service to the story at the end of the day. It's not about our egos. And so, I really went, that scene can go. And we got it down a bit more. It was just when it got to the final stage in the cut, when we got to our picture lock, the last couple of scenes, the debates, the conversations Probir and I had well into the night about, can we let this one go? Will we? There's also a duty of care to an audience of how long they can sit in a theatre without without needing to go to the bathroom. There's this basic stuff too. So that, I think it was the final few scenes, Pro, that were the most challenging to make that decision on, really.
Wow. So are there any plans in terms of screening, where people might be able to see it in the US?
We have entered a number of festivals in the US, and hopefully it'll be screening in some festivals in Europe as well, and of course here in Australia. So after the festival circuit is finished, then it will go on to streaming services, the usual culprits. So hopefully the people will be able to see it there.
Yeah,
beautiful.
That's the plan for it at the end of the day.
Again, I can't say enough good things about this film. It's both poetic and powerful at the same time. I wonder now if we can delve a bit more into your backgrounds. Like, for instance, Davini, you were saying that you've been an actress for 40 years. What was the leap like for you from in front of the camera to behind? Was it daunting? Was it something you always wanted to do? Is it something that you've dabbled with in the past? Something that you've done in the past as well?
A great question. Thank you. Look, my background, as I said earlier, is 1980s. Advertising, fashion, high-end fashion to magazines. I was also acting then. I think my first acting gig was on a show called Prisoner, which is called Cell Block something in America. I don't even know what it's called now. And then I went on to Neighbours, which many actors have done, and lots of other stuff. But alongside that, I was working with photographers. And back in the day then, fashion was shot on film. So we were always in the darkroom developing at the end of a day's shoot. And that was just so much fun. I just loved it. But I never saw myself directing at that point, apart from directing fashion shows and stuff like that. I segment produced a kids' TV series called Teeny Weeny Greenies a few years ago, which was environmental meets throwing a wooden chair under a gum tree and storytelling to little children. And that was fun. I enjoyed it. But I still hadn't really thought that I would cross over. But when the opportunity came, it felt a very natural next step for me to direct. And I think, and because I'm so visual down the lens, and I'm bloody particular, like if you ask my husband, I just annoy the hell out of him with how particular about beauty. But I think Probir's and my sum of the parts and meeting in the middle is he also has a beautiful aesthetic eye. We both have that. He's got the great technical experience. Like, I don't know which lens is which. All I know is what I like down the lens. And because of my actor's body, like my training way back in the day was Lee Strasberg method. I very much have an actor's body, and I would, as a director, I can feel my actors, my characters. I can feel their body with me and what feels authentic. I also felt very much a sense of needing to look after my actors and take them aside later and reassure them. Because even the most experienced actor in the world likes to be reassured, I think, at times of how, because they'd say to me, how was that? And I'd speak to them through the actor's lens to them about what I got out of their performance. And it was so much about creating a safe space for the work to come through us, because ultimately we're vessels, in my opinion, for the story that wishes to be told. So, yeah, for me it was a very pleasant leap. I mean, I got to do both. I did feel daunted about the idea of acting in one of the three lead roles and directing and producing, which, you know, producer's job, as all the producers in the world know this, you know, that everyone goes home at the end of the day and we've still got another 3 or 4 hours work to check in for everything for the next day, including call sheets and meetings with our production manager, et cetera, et cetera. They were very long days. So Probir, do you want to add to that, darling?
Oh, I think it was this. I mean, this film is ostensibly a female story, so I think from a directorial perspective, it was vital to have that female gaze across it, not just from a technical perspective through the camera, but also from a directorial perspective. So I don't think we could have done it any other way than without having that Davini's eyes across it. And I think one of the beauties about working as a pair is you actually do get more than the sum of the parts. So, you know, the ideas will just start to proliferate, something that you just hadn't thought of before. And then, you know, within a couple of minutes of brainstorming, suddenly you come up with a new idea. So I do think that, you know, it makes you better at it. I think one of the probably distractions for me on set was writing the music while we were filming. And I remember when we did the beach scene, near the end of the movie, you know, and we had the waves coming in onto the beach, and it was just this very natural rhythm, and I could hear the music in my head. And you could do, you know, you've got to be, you know, very conscious not to run away and write it down quickly, but you get the scene done. Make sure that you get what you need to do in the can, and then do it later. So you know, I think you know we did take a holistic approach to it, and I think that, you know, in hindsight, all the jobs that we picked up probably was a little bit too much. Possibly it nearly killed us all. So I think for the next film, Poems and Meditations, with the funding that hopefully we will get, you know, we'll have a little bit more help on the production side to get things done, and we don't have to kill each other.
Yeah, and I think I just want to speak to the whole side, Katerina, around music, is that there are very few writer, director, producers who are also musicians.
Yes.
Very few. In Australia, I don't know about the rest of the world, but Probir is one of a few people who have written, produced, directed, and scored his feature films. And he doesn't talk about it a lot, but he is actually a multi-instrumentalist musician.
Wow.
A very strong background. He writes for musicals as well, and documentaries, things at NGV, National Gallery of Australia. He's done the beautiful sculptures, a bit like MoMA in New York, beautiful sculptures, and he's written the soundscapes for them. Like he's very humbly a beautiful musician, and he's got very strong influences around his music, which he'll speak to, but he's also, one of his little private things that he doesn't speak of that I love is that his uncle is George Harrison from the Beatles.
Really?
Yeah, and he's also got very strong Indian influences because of his British Indian heritage, very strong influences from musicians in India, haven't you, Probir, that have and filmmakers, musicians in India that have really inspired you?
I think, yeah, the most inspiring filmmaker for me is Satyajit Ray. He was a famous Bengali filmmaker he was one of the only filmmakers that would write, direct, and score his films, and he was really the inspiration for me to try and go down that route. Another thing that he did was generally only use people once, so he would try and give people the experience on one of his sets, and then he would then send them out into the world, and then he would then bring the next lot in and give them the experience. So he was also, you know, partly responsible for trying to build cohorts, send them out into the filmmaking world. So he was right at the end of what was called the Bengali Renaissance, which is a tremendously rich cultural time for Bengal. And Dutt, who we spoke about with regards to Poems and Meditations, she was also one of the key contributors to that Bengali Renaissance. So, you know, and she happens to be one of my ancestors.
Wow, so you've hit the birth lottery. I wonder, that's interesting too, because like having all this upper echelon of talent, being, you know, your ancestors, being related to them, your family, does that put extra pressure on your back? Like, wow, I have to live up to type feeling?
If I ever felt, I'm very laid back actually, so I don't feel pressure. Well, on set I feel pressure, but normally in life, I mean, it was just something that you know, that you just grow up with. On my mother's side. So my mother's side was from working class Liverpool, and there's never any expectation. You know, working class Liverpudlians just get through life, and if you're lucky enough to be able to be good at something, then so be it. Whereas my father's side they would sit at home and write poetry and music all day. That's what they did for hundreds of years. They didn't do anything else but just create art. So either fortunately or unfortunately, my father wasn't artistic at all. So they skipped a generation, and then I just happened to pick it up. And he was very supportive, actually, in terms of encouraging me to learned to play the piano and learned to play the violin and learned to play the guitar. And, when I started writing, and, when I go back to visit, so I was in Calcutta a month or so ago visiting family, and they just assume somebody is going to continue picking up where the family left off. So somebody in the family has to be a writer and a musician, just happens to be me. So there was never any pressure. It was more of just an assumption. Somebody's got to do it.
Well, that's brilliant. And now, as you say, your daughter is studying film in school.
She studies film as an elective. She's only 14, so she's studying film as an elective. I suspect it's to get out of doing things like physics and but hopefully she will pick it up and do something with it. That would be nice to have another generation of filmmakers. But it's whatever she wants to do is up to her. I don't put any pressure on.
So I have to ask, did you ever have any meetings with your uncle where you discussed music, how to make music, the importance of music, anything like that?
He got into filmmaking. I mean, I was very young, obviously. Even when he passed away, I was still very, very young. But I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Monty Python.
Yes.
But he got involved with a number of films. The Life of Brian, I think, was one of the famous ones.
Right Side of Life.
Very much into that kind of, even in those days, that multimedia perspective. But from a musical perspective, I think I have one of his guitars here somewhere. But I mean, from a musical perspective, when I record, I still very much record in the old way. So I still record as if you're recording onto tape through an analog mix of audio, even though it goes onto hard disk these days. But I still actually do it the old hard way, bouncing tracks together and creating that kind of wall of sound method that they used to do in those days. So I generally don't use a lot of the modern technology that is available. Maybe I should, but I mean, when I'm writing a orchestral score, I will write each instrument separately and then create it as you would when you're presenting it to an orchestra, for example.
It really is an amazing film. I love, like, for instance, you mentioned the beach scene, like, you have one character going into the water, another one comes out. It's just beautifully, beautifully done. And so on your next film, you're both going to be directing. Again, you've kind of locked into this teamwork of writing and directing together. I've heard that's, kind of the hallmark of a success of a project is, it's a success if you want to do it again, if you want to work together again.
I think we just kind of carried on. I think we finished the one film and the conversation never stopped. So we just kind of continued into the next film.
It's really heartwarming to hear some feedback, especially from the other side of the world, because I think when we went to get on with producing the film, someone in the industry said, look, it's a film with universal themes.
Yes.
And so the side of the world, really getting it in your heart really means a lot. So thank you so much.
Well, yes, it's honest. You just hit on it right there. It is universal. Like I said earlier, without trying to give too much away, that scene in the restroom that kind of connects everything. It really is just universal theme of, meeting with somebody and having a tea, and then you have an epiphany, and of course the love. So yes, just thank you again for a brilliant, brilliant film.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sword fight, king of the hill. Fireflies and jars to buy, wonder far